You're listening to Good Air on goodforpa.com. Local parks and recreation improve life for everyone in Pennsylvania. The Good for You, Good for All initiative is here to help you learn about and use your local park and recreation facilities. Our state has more than 6,000 local parks. They let us get outside, enjoy nature, exercise and play, connect with our neighbors, and welcome visitors. Parks and recreation contribute directly to social equity and vibrant communities. Today, we listen in on a conversation about why kids need nature-based education. We'll hear from Chris Kemmerer, Education and Interpretation Section Chief at the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and Camila Rivera-Tinsley, Director of Education and Director of the Frick Environmental Center for the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. Today's segment is hosted by Philadelphia journalist Elena Johns and is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Urban Parks and Recreation Alliance. Enjoy.
Hi, Chris and Camila. Thanks for joining us on Good Air today. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it.
Chris, can we start with you as we get into the topic of nature-based education for young people? Can you share one of your favorite little-known facts about an animal or a plant or an ecosystem that's native to Pennsylvania? What's something that people are surprised to learn about?
One of my favorite facts to share with people, and I don't know, it always surprises me, and it oddly makes me kind of proud to be a Pennsylvanian, is that Pennsylvania has more than 86,000 miles of flowing streams and rivers, second only to Alaska. So for me to think that we are in the bottom half in terms of geographical size of the state, to know that we have more flowing creeks and streams and rivers than any other state other than our largest is pretty incredible to me. But at the same time, I think it also points to the importance that we have as Pennsylvanians to help protect our waterways and improve water quality, and then how that water quality and quantity impacts all of our daily lives, as well as all of the natural systems across the state.
That's true for people in the countryside and in the city too, definitely. So Camila, is there anything that you would add on that? Maybe especially something for your area in Pittsburgh that you would love people to know?
Well, one thing that I really, really enjoy is I love looking at the way that flowers and insects interact with each other. And a lot of people are afraid of bees and wasps. But the really cool thing for me is that there are more than 300 native bee species that are native specifically to Pennsylvania. So I think a lot of people are used to thinking about honeybees, or maybe they see wasps or hornets, and they're afraid of them, and rightly so. But there are so many other bee species that are solitary bees that don't sting, and that really help us to have the vast diversity of wild native flowers that we have, and help us to actually have food too. So I really, really appreciate that. I like going out and walking and looking for sweat bees and metallic bees and all different kinds. So I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing to see how many different insects you might see on just one plant. It's a really cool thing to learn about. So, Chris, can we do some more kind of bigger background on this? When we're talking about nature education in Pennsylvania, is this something that really is accessible to everyone in Pennsylvania? So for folks who might not be aware, can you give a quick overview of how many parks Pennsylvania actually has and what kind of different habitats can you find in them?
Sure. So Pennsylvania has 121 state parks. We're the fourth largest system in the country. But broadly, in terms of county parks and local municipal and borough parks and city parks, we have thousands of parks across the Commonwealth. But to speak more specifically about state parks, we have, every habitat that you would find in Pennsylvania, we pretty much have in a Pennsylvania state park. Most of our parks are forested, but some of them are old growth forests that have trees that are over 400 years old. We have lakes and streams and rivers. We have agricultural lands within our state parks. We have some fairly unique habitats as well. We have 7 miles of a sand beach on Lake Erie. We actually have a little over 70 acres of tidal marsh in the Chamonix State Park down in the Delaware Estuary. But then we also have a relic prairie at Jennings Environmental Education Center, and it's considered a relic prairie in that that habitat type used to be much more widespread across the western part of Pennsylvania and throughout kind of like the mid-Atlantic and out into Ohio. But now the largest sections of that particular type of prairie is located west of the Mississippi. So we have like a little pocket of it right there at Jennings. So there's a whole bunch to explore. And I think it's fairly easy for any citizen, any member of the Pennsylvania community to connect with and participate in park programs.
Mm-hmm. So the important follow-up to that is, and it sounds like you would say yes, is it easy for the average family or the average school field trip to get to a park in Pennsylvania?
Yes, absolutely. For Pennsylvania state parks, the goal and the vision was to have a state park within 25 miles of every resident. And largely that's true. And we have over 100 educators in our state park system, and they serve about 2/3 of all of our parks. And we offer programs year-round. You know, our state parks and our local parks, they don't close.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thanks for the background on that. Camila, let's go to you for a minute. So we're here talking about nature-based education, and can we define this as activities that we do outside, like boating or walking or hiking? How does outdoor recreation become nature education or vice versa? How does one feed into the other?
Well, you know, people really, one thing that everyone has in common, no matter what their economic background or, you know, what their culture is or where they come from, there is something that we all share. We all like to have a good time, and we all like to recreate in different ways. And we feel relaxed, and we feel comfortable, and we feel really good when we're sharing those moments with each other and having space to sort of have fun and really play. And I think that concept of play and sort of enjoying yourself and enjoying space out in nature is really, really important. And it is a pathway that leads you to being able to want to learn more about what you're seeing outside. So as an environmental educator, I really think that outdoor recreation and nature education are very parallel to each other, and sometimes they really actually overlap, because what you're trying to do while you're guiding folks and while you're sharing these experiences is you want to make them enjoy what they're feeling in the moment, and while they're enjoying it, a really good educator will sort of sneak some education in there and be able to ask some guiding questions that will make people think about what it is they're doing and think about the context that they're in. So I really think, you know, there's a really good saying, and I don't want to mess that saying up, but basically, if we love something, we will learn to protect that thing, or we'll want to protect that thing. And I think the job of environmental educators, first and foremost, is creating this sense of love and this sense of joy and wonder at just being outside. And so, you know, if you can find that sense of joy and wonder by having a picnic outdoors, or, you know, maybe going on a canoe ride or a bike ride, or many ways that you can sort of hang out and have some fun outside, I think that is a way, that's a pathway that leads to us being able to appreciate that thing that we're experiencing, and then we'll want to protect it. So I really think that really good education actually starts with stimulating those like joy centers in our brain.
Mm-hmm. And this seems to fit into a bigger trend in education overall, because in the past, we have this model of education that is sitting in a classroom, rows of desks, blackboards, but we know now that the best way to learn is participatory, it's interdisciplinary, and so it seems like getting outside, getting out in nature to learn really feeds into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as more research is coming out and as we've become more reflective of education, generally speaking, learners learn best by asking questions and having self-directed moments in nature, and also just self-directed moments generally. And so we're more open to engaging with concepts, and our brains are actually able to make more complex connections, which leads to true learning when we are actually immersed in something. So when we have the chance to physically touch something or to smell something or to experience something, that really stimulates our brain in a different way. And then once we start to foster conversations about what it is we're seeing, those conversations then reinforce our pathways of learning to really help us to cement some of these concepts that we want to share with children. So, Chris was talking about our waterways before. You could stand in the classroom and you could talk about watersheds and you can point to maps, but if you get folks outside, if you get youth and children engaged in seeing where streams are and actually getting into a stream and flipping over some rocks to see what kinds of creatures and macroinvertebrates live there, it's a whole different way of learning. And in some ways, it also actually leads to a more equitable playing field when you are learning, because people are able to make connections to themselves and to their past histories when they're out in these sort of open spaces. And so not only are they learning about the science of what's there, they're also thinking about how that relates to their own personal journey and to who they are as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. Sort of moving on from that, Chris, so we know that diverse approaches to learning are really important. But it's also really important that the learning environment reflects how diverse the students are themselves, because Pennsylvania is an extremely diverse state. You could talk by ethnicity, by nationality, by income, by tons of factors. So what can we do to make sure that professionals in parks and recreation and nature education are as diverse as the young folks in Pennsylvania? And how can we make sure this kind of education is really reaching everyone?
That's an excellent question. And within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, this is something that we are really aware of and that we're really concerned about. Specifically going and looking at our workforce, we recognize that we lack the diversity that is present within the communities of Pennsylvania. We're trying different programs and different ways to reach out and to make connections. Because when we think about ourselves as parks, we typically think of ourselves as a place that people come to visit. They come to us. But we have to kind of change our thought process. We have to change the way we do things. And we have to go to where the audience is, and we have to meet them where they are. That's just not meeting them physically where they are and where they're located, but also kind of where they are in terms of their skill level, their exposure to the outdoors, their comfort level to the outdoors. And we kind of have to remove those preconceptions that we have of what a visitor is to a state park. And instead, we need to start thinking about who are the communities within Pennsylvania that we want to serve. And some of the programs that we have that we do is one of our largest one is the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps. And it is a youth program, I think ages 16 to 24. And what we try to do is we try to get young people interested in outdoor careers by working within our local state parks and state forests. But at the same time, they're not just working. We try to, typically it's a Friday, but we try to take one day out of their week for them to recreate in their state parks and forests and, to learn how to go kayaking and to try fishing and other recreations. But we also expose them to the professionals that we have within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So they get to meet a forester, talk to a forester, and get a sense of what a forester does day to day. We have different kinds of foresters in terms of their job focus. They can meet a park manager and get a sense of what a park manager does or what a DCNR ranger does. So that is a program that we do, and we really promote that program in our smaller cities like Williamsport and Altoona and Johnstown. And this past year, we had 250 youth participate in that working program. We go out to a lot of career fairs at high schools and in colleges, and particularly for the high schools, we really try to go and focus those on more of our urban areas for them to see that there are options for them. And then even with our programming, we really try to kind of focus our programming. You know, we serve like perhaps a 25-mile radius around the park. There are a lot of school districts and schools that can be located near a park. So we do kind of take a look at looking at where are the schools that are the most diverse, perhaps what schools have lower income levels, where us reaching out is really a benefit to them and really helping them out and being able for those students to have more unique experiences, while a more wealthy school may be able to more readily do that because they have those kind of funds. But even our public programs, we oftentimes would do a program in a campground and kind of expect the campers to come to us. But we recognize that not everybody recreates the same way. We're finding that we have, even in our rural parks, we have lots of folks from diverse backgrounds coming to those parks. They're not going camping necessarily. They're not necessarily going hiking, but they're going to the pool. They're going to the beach. They're having picnics at our pavilions. So we've started to adjust our programs where we bring the program to them. We go to the pool, we go to the beach. We even have parks that will go around to the picnic pavilions and ask the families that are there if they'd like a 10 or 15-minute free program. So we're really trying to change the way we approach things and really kind of start a conversation and meet people where they are.
And I wanted to head back to Camila for a minute here to continue on this theme a little bit about what a diverse place Pennsylvania really is. So for you specifically, being based in Pittsburgh, you can speak to this. We've got major cities, we've got all kinds of suburbs, we've got rivers and mountains and forests and prairies, and we tend to think of nature and urban environments as these separate entities when really nature is still all around us, even when we're in the city. So do you want to speak to what nature education looks like in an urban environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of overlaps in what nature looks like in an urban environment and what it looks like in what some of us might call sort of like big nature, which would be nature parks and larger parks. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the same creatures are still in those spaces. I think what happens is when you're in a city, you see so much of the man-made world around you that you kind of forget about these things that are growing in the sides of the sidewalks or in an abandoned lot, the amazing flowers and insects and birds that you can find and on the edges of things. And so nature is really around us all of the time. And I think it's incumbent upon nature educators that are based within cities to really get people to sort of look at things in a way that they'd never looked at them before and to point out these spaces of nature. I know that right now a lot of nature-based education that happens within urban settings is really focusing on food and food systems and looking at urban farming and gardening as a way for people to connect to green spaces and to connect to nature and really actually to connect to themselves. I think in our fast-paced world where we've got technology everywhere, we've all got fancy, phones and things that can take us away from what's outside. I think it's nice to be reminded that everything that we use, even ourselves, all of these things can be traced back in some way to what is outside. And so I think that nature education in the city starts with sort of the human connection. So if you're looking at people first and then working outwards, I think that's a great way to connect people to nature. And I think, here I'm pretty lucky in working with the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. I work in an education building that is one of the greenest free buildings in the country and in the world, actually. So we have a living building here, and I think it really speaks to how nature education can work in in the built environment. So when I think about this building being net zero energy and net zero water, that means that we collect all of the energy that we need here through a series of solar panels, and we also collect all of the water that we use and that our visitors use in that same way. And there's lots of other features that are a part of this building, but we actually use this as a tool to think about the intersection of the built environment and the natural environment, because that's actually what a city is. And there's a unique opportunity to focus on the way that we design cities and the way that we design these physical things that we build as humans, to try to think about what are the impacts that our needs have on green space. So it's kind of nice, to be situated in the woods and to have this amazing building. And when kids and visitors come here, we can point out that, hey, did you have a great time walking out on those trails? You loved that beautiful skipper butterfly that you saw. You loved hearing that frog down in our streams. Well, we're working hard to protect those things by making sure we reduce our carbon footprint and that we really, really value the green and the living things. And also, I think urban environmental education is about valuing people and about valuing their experiences, because people are actually nature and are a part of nature. And so it's also nice to sort of get the opportunity to talk about some sociological issues and to focus on things like environmental justice or injustice, depending on how you see it. And so I think that cities can be a really, really vibrant place to make that human nature connection and talk about how each of those things impact one another.
And this green building that you're talking about is the Frick Environmental Center, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, so to build briefly on that, Chris, let's go back to what we were talking about a moment ago. When we are looking at the future, obviously we need ecologists and we need wildlife biologists and foresters and park rangers, but not everyone who encounters a Pennsylvania nature education program is going to end up pursuing a career in that field. So do you want to speak briefly to what are some of the ways this learning can still benefit them in their life and career, whatever it turns out to be?
Absolutely. There's just so much value in learning in the outdoors. It can really range from, I know Camila had mentioned this earlier, and she was probably much more eloquent about it than I will be, but it allows people of all abilities to kind of interact and kind of have their own personal experience. Oftentimes I would hear teachers say that they were really surprised how this one particular student really kind of reacted, maybe came out of their shell, or maybe was so focused, because in the classroom, in that very kind of traditional environment of learning, they don't thrive in that environment. But by being outside and by being able to be a little bit more free and to have more self-driven environment. But I think nature education overall, regardless of who's experiencing it, you are going to gain skills and knowledge that you can apply to the rest of your life. Some of it may be really kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe kind of obvious in the sense that you can gain skills and knowledge on how to safely enjoy the outdoors, or that you may gain a lifelong recreation, skills that will help you to build confidence in yourself.
Like learning how to swim or something like that.
Absolutely. But then also, too, I think by having those connections and by being outside, you gain an appreciation for nature. And this is where the Department of Conservation, Natural Resources, and State Parks really kind of falls. And we really believe in creating stewards and creating generations of stewards. A community who understands the importance of a healthy environment. A community of people who understand the health benefits of spending time in nature and who understand and participate in conservation actions. It doesn't matter what you do as a profession, whether you're a line cook, a UPS driver, or a lawyer, we want you to understand the value of the natural world and to help protect it and support it. And I think that is really kind of one of the underlying things for nature education, at least when we do it within state parks, is that we're really looking for people who, regardless of what the profession is, are going to be committed conservationists and stewards.
Yeah, and I think, Camila, if we can jump over to you for a minute, I think that you can speak well to a related idea. So in the past, nature education or environmental education might not have been understood as something that is valuable in so many different ways. It might have been devalued alongside other curricula, maybe like math or physics or chemistry. So do you want to talk about how our concept of environmental education is changing and diversifying?
Sure, absolutely. Unfortunately, the way our society has changed and our resources have been sort of jostled around. I think that environmental education began to be seen as something that was, nice to have, but it wasn't a necessity for the school curriculum. And then you couple this with schools sort of running out of money to be able to take field trips to different places, and then also not being able to stray away from their curriculum. And so there's been a lot of barriers and a lot of hurdles for students and for teachers to still be connected to environmental learning and environmental literacy in the way that we as educators think that they should be. So I think, we've done a lot of sort of general soul searching and navel gazing as a profession, and thought about what are the ways that environmental education can be interdisciplinary and can also touch on all of these other realms within education. So I think right now a lot of folks are focusing on the way that health intersects with environmental education. And so really hammering home that being outside and being in nature is really healthy on a lot of different levels. And so I think Chris talked a little bit about this, a healthy lifestyle. So you're actually exercising. Spending a half an hour out in nature per week can reduce your stress levels and actually reduce your elevated levels of your blood pressure levels. And so that's something that's amazing. And when we look at students and we think about the different challenges that students are facing, they're coming from high stress situations. Nature can also be a space where students can find ways to focus and find ways to really be able to think in a way that they didn't think when they were in the classroom. So it's our job right now as educators to be able to teach teachers and to teach other people who are sort of those power brokers in the education world that nature can have all of these interdisciplinary benefits. And also I think we are really pushing to think outside of the box in terms of nature education. So, we've been exploring here with how does nature education intersect with music and learning about music? How does it intersect with math? How does it intersect with literacy and with art? And once we begin to think of environmental science and nature as, an integrated context for learning, I think that's when, we can get more buy-in from teachers and we can get more buy-in from schools and administrators that may not have been able to connect those dots themselves.
Yeah, it makes sense. Chris, let's land really quick on something that you were talking about when we were getting started. On a statewide level and with your expertise, let's make this as practical as possible. If a parent or a caregiver or an educator who maybe hasn't used these resources before but wants to connect to them, what do you do to recommend that they start?
I have three simple suggestions. The first one, to get connected to any kind of programs that we offer for state parks, is to visit our online DCNR calendar of events. It's as easy as Googling a DCNR calendar of events, and it comes up with every public program and the vast majority of our volunteer days and opportunities as well in there. And, you can search them by activity, location. You can organize them by audience. So are you looking something for younger kids? Are you looking for something that maybe the whole family can do? You can go ahead and you can search that way. The next thing is, again, I really encourage individuals to reach out to their local state park and to talk to them. When you call the park, ask for the park educator. Oftentimes, our parks, they might have quarterly or monthly newsletters that they will mail out to you. Oftentimes, they have an email distribution list where once a month, they'll email all the public programs that are going to be happening that month. And that's a really nice way to kind of stay connected and to always hear about what's going on. Feel free to like your local state park or just state parks in general on Facebook, because we post a lot of our programs on social media as well. But we also really do value volunteering, and we have a lot of friends groups. And oftentimes our friends groups, they do a lot of volunteer work, they do fundraising, and they also do a lot of programming as well. So you can look into the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation, kind of the parent organization for most of our friends groups across the state. Or again, if you're reaching out to that park directly, you can kind of see if there is a friends group at that park, and you may want to connect with the friends group as well. So check out that calendar of events, reach out to the park, and look into our friends groups.
Yeah, so it sounds like a really quick matter of picking up the phone, going online, and finding the folks that you need to find. So to get it this kind of wrapped up, let's talk about it on a personal level for just a minute. Camila, let's start with you. Do you want to share a moment from your work in this field that particularly sticks up with you or makes you proud to be in this field?
Well, that's a really big question, and I have been thinking about this question. I mean, I just feel really lucky each and every day that I actually get to wake up and I get to do the thing that I really love, and I get to get paid for it. So I think that that's an amazing moment for me every morning that I wake up. I think personally, I came to this field because I found a lot of peace and solace in nature when I was a young person and sort of going through a lot of things in my own personal life. I was lucky enough to be able to interface with a teacher that allowed me to hang out in the greenhouse and take care of plants. And I never would have known that would have been something that I would have gravitated towards if I hadn't had that experience. And so I think that's kind of what got me into the field. And the thing that keeps me going and that makes me proud to have been in the field for over 15 years is thinking about all of the young people that I have been able to inspire, and even colleagues that I've been able to inspire. So I get a lot of students that have come to me over the years, and they've never experienced what we would call maybe little big nature. So coming to an urban space or an urban nature park, they've never experienced it. And the thing that they really haven't ever experienced is, what does it feel like to see someone who looks like them in those spaces and enjoying those spaces and sharing with them? And I have seen countless numbers of eyes sort of light up. I've had people literally ask me tell me that they didn't know, I didn't know that this was something that I could do. So each one of those moments is really a moment of joy and a moment of triumph for me, because I really just want to share this thing that has brought me so much joy in my life. And also I want the field to be a little less lonely. So as Chris alluded to before, there isn't a whole lot of diversity within this field. And I hope that, with each lesson that I teach, with each time that I engage with a person that's coming into a space, that I broaden their horizons a little bit. And, maybe in a future world, my daughter will get to see a lot more people that look like her out in this field. And so those are the things that inspire me and make me proud to have this career.
Chris, is there anything that you would add?
Yeah, I actually had I had this experience while teaching. This was a while ago, and I think it speaks to the value of connection. And so I was an intern for Audubon, Maryland, D.C., and I was teaching a third grade class, and I think we were doing an insect search along a wetland trail. And this little boy comes up to me, and he has a frog in a container. And the container was way too small for the frog, and It's like it looked really sad, and it's like its toes were kind of sticking out, and I just kind of looked at him. He's like, I saved him, and I asked him to clarify, and he's like, I saved him. He's like, look, he's like, this snake was trying to eat him, and sure enough, down the length of the trail, there was a snake that was coming out from the reeds and was definitely looking for where their lunch was, and I'm an environmental educator. And I am afraid of snakes. I appreciate their place in the ecosystem, but if I never see them, I would be perfectly fine. So I did not want to deal with the snake and a group of third graders. So my little teachable moment was that we don't get in between a predator and its prey. And we're just gonna put the frog. We're gonna let the frog out.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna put it on the trail, and we're just gonna let it go. That's what he did. And well, the snake found their lunch and decided to eat lunch in front of the whole entire third grade class.
Oh, beautiful.
The eyes went big, the jaws dropped. But I must admit, the rest of my lesson was amazing because they were so much in tune to what they were observing and what they were seeing, because I think oftentimes nature is kind of this passive thing, that's kind of in the background that we don't necessarily see,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't realize that it's truly alive, and we don't get to see the action of nature oftentimes. So when we get to see that, it's a connection that's going to last forever. I think it's oftentimes why people get really excited about seeing the tides move in and out, or they see a pod of dolphins along the water, because it's something that you can see a video of, but you don't get to experience it. And I've just never experienced anything like that before, but it really reinforces the power that nature has, and how, it can be the simplest connection. It can really kind of turn people on. And it was just an amazing experience. And it has stayed with me for over a decade now.
Well, thanks for sharing. I think on the note of the dolphins and the snake and the frog and the third graders, we can wrap up. Thanks so much for chatting with us on Good Air. I've enjoyed hearing from you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Good Air. To learn more about the Good for You, Good for All Parks and Recreation campaign, and for information on the Pennsylvania Urban Parks and Recreation Alliance, go to goodforpa.com. Good Air is supported by the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society and the PA Department of Conservation and Natural Resources.